React, React Native, Preact, SolidJS, Qwik. What do all these frameworks have in common? The answer: JSX. JavaScript XML, popularly known as JSX, was first introduced in 2013 alongside React by Facebook, has now become a huge part of the JavaScript ecosystem to the extent that even all JavaScript runtimes such as Node.js, Deno, Bon support rendering of JSX on the server. JSX gained significant popularity in the JavaScript community because it provides a more declarative way to create and define UI components compared to the traditional imperative way we were used to with vanilla JavaScript DOM manipulation. But what does that essentially mean for you as a JavaScript developer? It means by learning JSX, you have the basics and the fundamentals of 5 different frameworks and the meta frameworks built on top of them. And while there are variations on how some of these frameworks define and create their UI components and manage states, the general and underlying principle is essentially the same. So now more than ever, you need to learn JSX, how to write JSX, as the skills are transferable and can be applied to any of these frameworks I've mentioned. And also in my previous HTML, CSS, JavaScript to React series on this channel, a lot of people seem to be interested in learning how to convert HTML, CSS, and JavaScript into React JSX code. And that is exactly what I'm going to be showing you in this video. Because in this video, we're going to be looking at how to convert your HTML, CSS, and JavaScript code into JSX for React, React Native, Preact, SolidJS, and Qwik. And without wasting much time, let's dive right in. Okay, 2 things before we continue. Firstly, the code for this tutorial is going to be in this particular repo right here, and the link is going to be in the description below. And you can select or choose any branch so you can get the code for any of the frameworks such as React, SolidJS, Qwik, React Native, and of course the vanilla HTML, CSS, and JavaScript files. And also, here's a quick little hack for you. Don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button to get access to more awesome content like this. This will also encourage me to work harder in giving you the best content and tutorials. And we're moving on. Okay, the first thing I would like to do is create the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript code we're going to actually be converting into JSX. And right here, I have my index.html and app.js file created and opened. And let's create our basic HTML markup. Let's update the document title. Next, I'm going to start the local development server using the live server extension. And for those of you wondering where is the CSS file, well, I'm just going to use the Tailwind CSS place CDN. Note that you shouldn't use this in live and production environments. Next, let's come inside of our body tags, and I'm going to add a main tag, which is going to take up the full height and width of the screen. Next, how about I sprinkle in a little bit of HTML magic and save. Okay, maybe it's not really HTML magic, but actually the code for our HTML product card, which you are going to be using for this particular video. And finally, let's add our JavaScript file. Now we're inside of our app.js, and the goal is to create something where we can click on this plus button and we can add the item to cart, and we can also come and click on the minus button and also reduce the amount of quantity in cart, and we will see it live right here. And we can also click on the add to cart button, and that will also do the same thing, and also click on the heart icon to be able to toggle between whether the item has been added to wish list or not. Pretty simple, right? So first, let's create 2 variables to track the quantity and the wish list. Next, let's create our DOM element. And now you can see we've selected the buttons we are going to add our event listeners and also the element that is going to display the quantity. Next, let us add our event listeners. And we've added 3 different functions which we are actually going to create in just a sec. The first one is the increase cart quantity function. And as you guessed it, is basically going to increase the quantity and then show it inside of the DOM, update the DOM accordingly. Then the second one we are creating is the reduce quantity function, which essentially is going to reduce the number of quantity and update the DOM. But first is going to check if the quantity is greater than 0 before actually reducing it, because we can't have a quantity that is lesser than 0. For example, -1, -2, -3. But if the condition is false, that is the quantity is not greater than 0, then it shows an alert message saying the item is not in the cart. And we're going to create the last function, which is the toggle wishlist function. And this basically just toggles the is wishlist added variable from true to false and vice versa. Then it goes to perform a check. If the is added to wishlist is true, then I need you to update the DOM and remove or add this particular class classes? If not, also remove and add these particular classes. Pretty simple, right? Okay, let's test this out. And as you can see, this works nicely. I can increase the quantity, also reduce the quantity. And if the quantity is 0 and I try to reduce it even further, it gives me our alert. And we can see also that the wishlist toggle works, plus the add to cart button also increase the quantity. Nice. Now, before we start writing our JSX code, I would like to give you the basic rules when writing JSX code. Number 1, JSX files are essentially JavaScript files. So you can save them with .gsx, .js, or when using TypeScript, .ts, .tsx. But generally for me, I tend to save them with either .gsx or .tsx. This enables me to be able to differentiate at first glance when looking through my project files. So first, I'm going to import React. Number 2 thing you need to know is JSX is basically a function that returns HTML. Next, I'm going to export this function as default. Next, I'm going to paste in our previous HTML code, but I'm sure you can already notice some few changes. Which brings me to the third thing you need to know. Attributes such as class become class name, written in camel case. For becomes HTML4. Also, attributes such as stroke-width becomes stroke width using camel case. Also, all HTML elements needs to be closed, either self-closing or with their closing tags. How about we put everything we've learned together and make use of them inside of a React project? So I've just set up a new React project with Vite and I've added theme with CSS. This is the theme configuration file. And inside of the index.css, I've added a theme directives. And now let's start our development server by running npm run dev. And now I'm going to switch over to the components. First, we have the product card component, and we just see the function and which we are returning as default. Now I'm going to add my HTML there. And then the next thing I'm going to do is to add a little bit of functionality, like we did with the vanilla JavaScript earlier. So first, I'm going to import useState from React. And state is basically a fancy way of telling React that we want to create a variable that can change and update the DOM. And whenever we use useState, we basically get two things from it. The first one is the actual value we want to make use of, the actual state. And then the second one is the setter function, which we use to change and update the state. Now let's add for quantity and is added to wish list. I'm also going to create the functions increase cart quantity, reduce quantity, and then toggle wish list to toggle our is added to wish list state. Next, I'm going to conditionally render the background color for the wish list icon depending on is added to wish list state. It is true, it renders BG yellow 500, and if not, it renders BG white. Next, let us add our click event and our state where necessary. Next, let's go to our app.tsx file. So first, I'm going to add the main HTML element, and I'm also going to import the product card component inside of here. Now, let's see how our app looks like and if it works. Okay, this seems to be working just fine. Now, one of the benefits of using a component system like this is I can just duplicate the product card, and we can see we have duplicates already here without needing to rewrite the code all over. How about we make things even a bit more interesting and dynamic? So I have an array of objects here, which we are basically going to render and loop over. So the way we do that right here inside of React is by using the array.map method. And we basically loop through and pass in what we call props inside of our product card, which is the dynamic data we want it to render. Now let's go back to our product card component and we're going to make the necessary adjustments. So I'm going to add a props, which is basically a TypeScript way of defining our types and the structure. So right here, we're going to pass it inside of the component function, but I'm just going to destructure it right here. And now let's add the dynamic data inside of our component. And now we can see this works nicely. We now have 3 different product cards, which actually works fine with different data. And I can come right here and update one of the data inside of our array, and we should see it get updated. Let's see if the functionality still works. Okay, looks good to me. That's nice. Okay, let's move on to the next framework, which is Preact, and let's see if there are any JSX changes we need to be aware of. Okay, we have our Preact project set up with Vite here, and it basically has similar structure or the same structure with our React project. So how about we look into the codes and let's see if there's anything new or updated. As you can see, everything inside of our app .tsx files still looks the same. How about our product car.tsx? We can see that we only have one little change, which is we are importing use state from Preact/hooks, but every other code, every other piece of code and functionality still works just like in React, given that React and Preact are very similar frameworks. Okay, that brings us to framework number 3, which is SolidJS. So let's see how JSX actually looks and works inside of SolidJS. And the biggest difference you may actually notice on first glance is the fact that we're back to class instead of class name. I mean, what's the deal with that? What if I'm just getting comfortable with using class name in frameworks like React or Preact? But anyway, let's move on. Another big change you might notice is the fact that when looping, instead of making use of .map, we can see that we have a for component to actually loop, which SolidJS gives us, and then we pass in the data we actually want to loop through, and subsequently the profs inside of the component. And another significant difference is that SolidJS makes use of signals instead of use states, but only for primitive values. For data types like objects, you might need to go to store, which is a different approach as compared to React. And the way we actually make use of them is we call it like a function. So we have quantity and then followed by our parentheses here. And same way, whenever we want to set it or show it inside of the HTML markup, we do the same thing whenever we are using signals. And we will see that everything works perfectly the way it's supposed to. And let's move on to Qwik. Don't worry, I promise to be quick with this one. And I've also got another Qwik project set up with Vite. And it looks very similar, but how about we go to the code and let's see if there are any changes or differences. Now, the first thing you're going to notice is the presence of these components and $sign. So what is the deal with these guys, by the way? Well, Qwik itself provides an explanation for what these are. And they basically allow the Qwik optimizer to break the components into chunks and to be able to serialize data and make it fast. It's one of the reasons why Qwik is quick. And another thing is we are also back to using our classes, though we can use array.map to loop through and render our components like we're used to in React, etc. Now, let's go to our product card component. And another thing you'll notice is instead of making use of states, we instead make use of signals. And if we want to access our signal value, we use .value. Also, our click function also has to carry this extra $sign. I wish I can just cash out those dollars in real life, man. And if we should test this out, this should still work perfectly fine. Yeah. And now, moving on to React Native. Here are some Zen words for you. A wise man once said, if you know enough of React, you definitely know more than enough to get started with React Native. You don't know who said that? Yeah, that was me. Okay, so I basically have an Expo React Native project set up right here. And let's just dive right in and let's see some of the differences and changes we have in the way we write JSX for React Native versus perhaps React or others we've seen so far. So we first start writing our function as normal. Then I import some necessary components from React Native. And I had my array of products. Then next, I'm going to add the components in sequential order in which I need them. First, the status bar, followed by the save area view, and then the scroll view to enable us to scroll in our screen. And then I finally loop through the product array and render the components. And finally, create some styles. Before we continue, some few things I would like to note. In React Native, the major changes we have include the fact that we don't have necessary HTML elements like div, etc. Instead, they are replaced with things such as view and text. Apart from that, everything else is basically the same. Our logic, the way we handled our states, our functions, and so on. Also, we don't create styles the normal way we do in CSS. We basically have style sheets in React Native, but they are a bit different and in camel case and needs to follow a specific structure. And as we can see, our mobile app basically works fine. This is looking good. Sorry I couldn't add the necessary icons such as in the wish list. I just got lazy and tired at the last minute. And well, I'm sure that you understand and you get the gist of how JSX basically works in all of these frameworks and the subtle, small differences we have between JSX components in each of these frameworks. And that will be all for today, guys. If you have any questions, any inquiries, or opinions, please just leave them in the comment section below. I would really love to hear what you think. And also, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to smash the like and subscribe button, and I'll see you in the next one.